Welcome, everybody.
All right. So here we go. So welcome everybody to this St. Patrick's Day webinar. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Sorry, I apologize for getting late, a little technical difficulties, but let's just jump right in. So the reason you're here is because we've been wanting to talk about Azure Data Studio for a little bit. So today's webinar is going to be our experience of using Azure Data Studio for 30 straight days, and we'll kind of give you some background as to why we're doing that. Before we get started, let me just do a little housekeeping here. A little bit about myself. I am a senior consultant with SQL Solutions Group. Been here since August of last year. Been working with SQL Server for probably close to 30 years, if not 30 plus. Been doing it probably, I think, right as 4.2 was in, at 6.0 was coming out. It started with 4.2 just a bit, and then 6.0 came out. So I've been doing this for quite a while. Been doing database platform stuff. So even before joining SQL Solutions Group, I was a data platform evangelist for Microsoft. In fact, I was even before joining Microsoft, I was one of the first 4 SQL Azure MVPs. Even wrote a book about it, and that was kind of hard when you're evangelizing a platform that's got, biggest database is a gig and telling customers to migrate. But so that was a lot of fun, but learned a lot. And so I've been doing Azure and data platform things for a long time, and really enjoying it. A little bit about who we are, SQL Solutions Group. This was founded by Randy Knight just over 10 years ago. Randy's a Microsoft certified master, and SQL Solutions Group is, we like to call it a boutique consultancy where, we do a full range of SQL Server offerings. So remote DBA, health checks, full scope project consulting. We make sure that your environment is running healthy and take care of your data platform environment. And if you have any needs for understanding more about SQL, we also provide SQL coaching to help you grow and learn more about your environment and SQL Server in general. So we are a Microsoft Silver partner in the data platform, and so we really enjoy doing what we do. And we're here to help if you guys need some help. So with that, here's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to kind of provide some context around why this webinar. We don't want to spend a lot of time with SQL Server Management Studio, but we are kind of give a one slide background into kind of the history. We're then going to dive into Azure Data Studio and our experience with Azure Data Studio, and then we'll dive in and do some demos, and these demos are really focused on our experience over the last 30 days. And then what we're going to do is Randy's going to turn on his mic, and we're going to kind of do a roundtable Q&A and just talk about what we learned over the last 30 days. So with that, let's dive right in and have some fun. So a quick background about why this webinar. And I don't know if you follow us on, I've been reading our blogs. We blog regularly, but we wrote a blog about a month ago about the experience we had. So I had was installing SQL Server, upgrading my SQL Server Management Studio on my local box, and I think I was running 18.4 or 5 or something like that. And typically when we work with our clients, where there's a jump box we log into and we run SQL Server Management Studio from there. So I hadn't opened mine for a little bit. So I downloaded the latest, installed it, and then it told me that, hey, by the way, we're also going to install Azure Data Studio. And I thought, why are you installing Azure Data Studio? I only want SQL Server Management Studio. And the fact that it was kind of forcing it on me kind of set me back a little bit, because like, hey, the last time I used Azure Data Studio, which is quite a while ago, I think when it was called SQL Operations Studio, it was kind of short on functionality for what I needed to do my day-to-day job. And so I was kind of like, man, I was a little upset because one, Microsoft is forcing it on me, but hey, can it help me do my day-to-day job? And so after I, mused a little bit around that, Randy and I were talking about it. And so we backed the bus up and said, we had several internal discussions to go, hey, can we, do we really understand enough about Azure Data Studio to, be efficient and effective in our day-to-day jobs, as a DBA, or what we do and what we help our clients with? And so at that point, we decided, we need to be realistic about this and say, well, let's put Azure Data Studio to the test. Let's see if we can use this and really kind of, do a nice case study around Azure Data Studio. So that's why, and then we thought, well, let's just do a webinar around it. So that's kind of the background about why this, because we thought, hey, let's talk about and let's really use Azure Data Studio, and we'll kind of get into this a little more. But I also want to set some expectations here, because this webinar is not it's not a hey, one is bad and one is good scenario. This isn't a throwdown or a head-to-head comparison quite about what this is or is not. I don't want this to shoot bullets at one and praise the other, right? This is what this is, though, is our experience over the last 30 days using Azure Data Studio, really, and answering the questions about how efficient how efficient can we be as in our day-to-day jobs. Can we do the things that we help our clients with, and then kind of write down and share our experience with that. And we'll actually talk about that in a little bit more. So that's what this is. This is not a throwdown. This is just we want to share our experience and kind of help people understand more about Azure Data Studio. So let's talk a little bit about SQL Server Management Studio, because we've been using Azure Data Studio in our role and you probably have as well, for a really long time. SQL Server Management Studio is all about, it's an environment for managing SQL Server environments and infrastructure, right? And we've been using it for a long time. We've grown to love it. It's got Object Explorer and Solution Explorer. We can, create store procedures off templates. It's got a Template Explorer, a nice built-in query editor, some visual tools in there. It helps us manage our integration services and analysis services and reporting services environments. Right, it's this wonderful environment, this great tool that allows us to manage our SQL Server environments. Right, it does wonderful around that. So this isn't a knock around SQL Server Management Studio. We use it every day. We love it. One of the caveats, though, is it's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, the latest download of SQL Server Management Studio is almost 700 meg. Now, caveat to that, this download does include 100 meg of Azure Data Studio. So even without that, it's still almost still nearly 550 meg download, right? But we use it and love it. Now, what was needed, so let's take a step back and say, all right, we've been using SQL Server Management Studio for a really long time. But if you look at where Microsoft has been going for the last probably decade, at least decade, if you look at where things are, technology is going, SQL Server, the Management Studio has been getting kind of getting long in the tooth, right? We need something. There's been a paradigm shift. Things are moving to the cloud. SQL Server Management Studio is Windows only. Microsoft needed something that supported multi-platform, that supported, on-premise and cloud environments. And SQL Server Management Studio, while they tried to build that in and did a somewhat decent job, it really wasn't meant for that. So we need something that supports and was kind of going along with the time. Something new, shiny and new that supported where things were going, right? Now, this has happened before, and when Randy and I were talking about this, it was kind of interesting because Randy brought this. I totally forgot about this, and Randy goes, well, hey, this did happen before, right? Something shiny and new came along. Now, I don't know if you remember long time ago, but if you've been doing SQL Server for a while, you remember Enterprise Manager and Query Analyzer, right? And I remember that triggered, that was like, oh, that's right, I totally forgot about that. And I started thinking about that. And I remember, I can't remember what version that, SQL Server Management Studio came out. It was like, I think it was 6.5 or 7 or something like that.
2005.
2005, okay. 2005. So I remember using this, and I remember first when SQL Server Management Studio came out, there was a lot of criticism around SQL Server Management Studio. People thought that Microsoft was dumbing these tools down to a degree where, like, well, why can't we just do things the way they were? So we've kind of come full circle in that, right? We went from, Enterprise Manager and Query Analyzer to SQL Server Management Studio. We're doing this again, going from SQL Server Management Studio to this new tool that allows Microsoft to go and support their the new technology that's coming out to support on-premises in the cloud. So I think about it, Azure Data Studio is built on VS Code. It's a super lightweight, modern editor experience, comes with source control, it's customizable. One of the great things about this is multi-platform. In other words, it runs on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, all these different environments. Look, as good as SQL Server Management Studio is, it's a great tool, but with a shift to the cloud, something was needed that really supports on-premises in the cloud and platform environments, and that does that well, and was versatile in its capabilities, right? So now we have the Azure Data Studio that has built-in notebooks for code collaboration. It's extensible, a lot easier, much easier to extend than SQL Server Management Studio. Notebooks these are awesome. If you haven't used notebooks yet, we're not going to get into notebooks. Maybe that'll be a webinar for a future time, but notebooks, these are simple little web applications that really allow you to create and share documents containing live code, right, that you can share and collaborate with. You can do data cleaning on them, you can do data transformation, statistical modeling, all these data visualizations, all these great things in notebooks, right? So I don't want to get into all the things that SQL Server that Azure Data Studio does, but something new was needed, and the goal was to say, hey, if I'm going to use this, can I use this with, in my day-to-day job, right? So, and what the cool thing is about it, if you really look at it, it's less than 1/5 the size of the install for SQL Server Management Studio, which is kind of cool. Quick download, quick install, and I'm done, right? And it's one of these tools that, they keep up to date, and they do the same thing with SQL Server Management Studio, right? Both these tools get regular love. In fact, Azure Data Studio had a new push release this morning, right? So, which is kind of cool. They are continually doing updates to both of these tools, but with a big focus on Azure Data Studio. Just a quick note about extensions. Again, this isn't about extensions, but I just wanted to mention this briefly. Extensions allow you to add more functionality to Azure Data Studio, and these extensions are realistically provided by the Azure Data Studio team, by Microsoft, and you. If there's some functionality that you don't see in Azure Data Studio, add it, write an extension and add it. And the way the Azure Data Studio team works is that they collect this telemetry data. They know how many times an extension's been downloaded. They know how many times it's been installed. They know the usage of Azure Data Studio and the extensions within Azure Data Studio. And they track this data. And if they determine that, hey, this extension has been downloaded X number of times and installed and used heavily, then they weigh that very heavily to say, do we bake that into the product, right? So, they track that information, right? So our test was to say, after all the internal discussions that we had, was to say, can we use Azure Data Studio straight for 30 days as much as possible in our day-to-day job, right? Can we kind of set aside SQL Server Management Studio? Can we use Azure Data Studio for 30 days? And we started this after Randy's webinar, after Andy's webinar last year, or sorry, last month. Can we do 30 days of Azure Data Studio? And what we wanted to do was provide answers to that, right? How effective can we be? How effective were we? And can we do most things in Azure Data Studio? So what I want to spend the rest of the time on in this webinar is kind of a summary of our findings and kind of give you an idea of our experience in using Azure Data Studio, right? So what I'm going to do is highlight some things that were awesome, and then some things that where the functionality wasn't where we needed it to be, so we had to go back and forth between Azure Data Studio and SQL Server Management Studio, right? So again, this isn't a knock on one and a praise the other. This is just our experience, and just highlight some things we thought was awesome, and kind of some things where, hey, the functionality wasn't quite there, right? All right, so I'm going to back out, and one of the things that we really liked, they typically say, they basically typically say that, I wouldn't start a SQL Server Management demo without having SQL Server Management Studio started. But one of the things that we really like about Azure Data Studio is how fast it loads. So I don't even have it loaded, and I'm going to launch Azure Data Studio and show you how fast it loads. Bam, done, right? That probably took 2 seconds, if that. And I've got my local connections here. And one of the things I really like is that I can connect to and group my servers. So I've got an availability group at home that I connect to, and here's my local box, right? Love that. There's and one of the other things talking about fast, I just want to point this out, is its scripting capability is super fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I've got AdventureWorks here, and I've got Wide World Importer. So I'm just going to script a simple store procedure and show you how fast it scripts this, right? So I'm going to get manager employees, and script is create, done, right? That is, if I would still be waiting in SQL Server Management Studio, right? That is super fast. I love the fact that Azure Data Studio, and I think Randy and I both love the fact that this is super fast. Oh, nice. That wasn't part of the demo. All right. But we love the fact that it loads fast, that it scripts fast, and there's other. So love the fact. All right. What I want to do is, one of the other things that I want to show you is kind of the keyboard control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open right mouse click on the server and say, let me expand that back out, say new query, right? And I'm going to write a select statement. So I'm simply going to say select star from, we'll say human resource, let's see. Oh, let me go to the right database. And I love the fact that IntelliSense is built in, human resources dot employee. One of the things that when we first started using this that kind of drove me up the wall was, typically, a lot of us as developers and DBAs, when I've finished writing my control E, right? So if I control E, what it does is it brings up this shortcut. It doesn't execute my code, and that kind of was like, whoa. So I can highlight it and run it, right? But what I want to point out is, how do I fix that? How do I get into and get the things, how do I get these shortcuts the way that I want them to? There's 2 ways to do that, right? I can go File, Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, right? And here's all the current Azure Data Studio keyboard shortcuts, right? So if I were to, I can change it here. So if I look for run query, right? My run query, so it's F5 in Azure Data Studio. So I can go back here instead of Control E, I can hit F5 and it runs my query, right? If I were to actually look for Control E, so if I type CTRL, whoops, let's do that again, CTRL plus E, right? What that does is it says, oh, it opens go to file and focus on editor. So there's a couple other, show explorer. So it does a couple other things, right? Control E, go to file or open the quick picker, right? So I can edit this. I can say, well, I want to go and let's open run query again. And I can edit that and I can say, well, I want to make that Control E as well. But it says, hey, there's already two existing commands that have this key binding, right? So I want to do that. So, I'd have to change things around. Well, there's an easier way to say, well, I like my SQL Server Management Studio key bindings. How do I use those? Well, that's awesome because what I can do is go to the extensions here and say, well, I want to look for SSMS Keymap. And what this does is this actually imports. This was done by Kevin at Microsoft. There's a PM on the team who actually just imports your SQL Server Management Studio shortcuts into Azure Data Studio, which is awesome, right? So if you love your Azure, SQL Server Management Studio shortcuts and you want to keep those, you can install this extension and it'll bring those in, and Control E will work. It is super nice, right? All right, the other thing I want to point out, which is awesome, I really like this. Let's close these windows. I want to talk about snippets for a little bit, okay? What I want to do is, we talked about snippets, we may have talked about snippets earlier, but snippets is ability built into Azure Data Studio. So if I open a new query window, so let's open a new query window. Let's see. So I'm going to open a new query window here. And if I type SQL, look at all those snippets, right? These are all built-in snippets. So if I actually say create store proc, boom, there's my store procedure. Love that. And what it does is it highlights everything that I need to change. It's so cool. I love that, right? Kind of like the template explorer in SQL Server Management Studio, but I don't have to go to a different window. I just type SQL and there it is. So it allows me to create these things and work with things much faster and much easier. So then you're thinking, well, can I extend this? Can I create my own? Absolutely, you can. And I love this about Azure Data Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Control-Shift-P, and I'm going to type snippets, right? And this comes up, preferences, configure user snippets, right? And I can add different ones, but I'm going to do one SQL. I'm going to do one that have to do with, like you saw, if I type SQL, this whole list of SQL snippets comes up. So I'm going to click SQL.json, and all these snippets are just JSON files with these code snippets in there. And I added these two yesterday. So here's a JSON file of SQL that allows me to customize this, or add new snippets. And this SQL.json has two snippets in there. So if I go back here to this, and I type SQL again, right? It did these two. So there's create table 2 and select top 5, right? That's those two. Select top 5 and create table snippet. All right. Oops. You know what? I forgot to fix my demo. So I'm going to do this, go back here and say SQL, and there's these two new snippets, right? So create table 2 and select top 5. So your question is, all right, so here's a JSON file with 2 snippets. How do I add one? Well, that is super simple. I can just add another snippet of code to this JSON file to continue adding in snippets. So I'm going to go to my notepad here. I'm going to bring this in. And they're just separated by comma. So I'm going to go to the end here and just paste this in. And this is one that says create audit. right? So it's SQL create audit, and all it does is create a server audit. So right now, if I just type SQL, right, I see the create table 2 and select top 5, for example. But I'm going to save this now. I'm going to go back here and do SQL and say, there it is. Now there's create audit. So if I SQL create audit, bam, there it is. Okay. And I can continue adding snippets to this file if I want, and it'll just continue adding to that list. It is so awesome. I love that about it. It's so much easier. And all that snippets are is that just, and this is a great example up here, which I really like. It's just kind of a header definition, but I got the prefix, which is what shows up here when I type SQL, right? SQL create audit. That's the prefix, the body, and then the description. Right, that's all it is. You know, probably I don't think you really need a description, but you just need the prefix and the body. And the body, if it's a kind of a multi-line, needs to go in these brackets. But it's really that simple. You're just basically taking your create statement, kind of breaking it up with double quotes. Love that. So super simple. Okay. Let's move on. Okay. My notes. Yes. All right. One of the other things that's really awesome, we talked about this, I talked about this and showed this on a slide, is the source control, right? So kind of formatting source control. So what I'm going to do is the formatting is kind of light in Azure Data Studio. So if I go to settings here, and go to extensions and go to the MS SQL configuration, I can do some level of code formatting. I want my code to look a certain way. This is built in, but it's sort of light, right? So, you know, should keywords be formatted as uppercase? Should, you know, data types be formatted as uppercase, right? Should commas be placed at the beginning of each statement in a list? Things like that, right? I get a certain level of formatting, which is cool. It's built in, it's free, but you know, if, I can, if I want to, kind of add, you know, there's also, if we go to the extensions here, there's also if you type in poor, oops, if I spelled poor right. There's also this poor SQL formatter written by WSR Publishing. It does a little bit, adds a little bit more functionality to the formatting. There's also the Redgate one, and I think that's paid. But so there are some ways to format. But what's kind of cool is I want to do a demo that kind of shows kind of an end-to-end. I'm going to script, I'm going to format, and then actually check into and add to source control. So what I'm going to do is go back here. I'm going to script that same store procedure, create, right? How do I format? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, highlight this little section here, and I'm going to right mouse click. There's a keystroke to this, but I'm just going to say format document, Shift Alt F. Bam, formatted, right? If I could go and add additional formatting, but I like this. I'm going to keep it sweet. And go from there. So now what I'm going to do is I've got the code formatted the way I want. What I'm going to do now is I want to actually check that into a source control. So I'm going to go here to a source control, and it says I don't have anything configured yet from a source control perspective. So I'm actually going to open a folder. So I'm going to go to SSG AdventureWorks, select my folder. Actually, let's do that. Yeah, I'm going to say let's open a folder. I'm going to lose my changes, but we'll do it again. AdventureWorks, select my folder. Yes, close that. Let me just do this again. I'm going to close this. I'm going to open my folder. SSG AdventureWorks. When I select my folder, it's going to say. Go back here and say, hey, now, and so let me just caveat this and say you do have to have Git installed for this. But it's going to say, do I want to initialize this repository? Awesome. Yes, I'm going to initialize my repository. And I'm going to call this source control message. So I haven't committed anything. So I'm going to go back here now. And I'm going to rescript that store procedure real quick. I got this demo working yesterday, so hopefully this will work today. Script create. Let me format that again, just because I love formatting. Blam. All right. Let me go back now here and say one unsaved. So I'm now going to save this. Control S. And I'm going to save this into this. We'll call this. This was. We'll just give it a name real quick. We'll call this Get Manager Employees. Click Save. Right. There we go. So there. Now I can commit that. So now I have the option to open the file. I can discard the changes. I can stage the changes. So if I stage the changes, now I'm going to commit that. So there's my changes. So now I can push that. So I'm going to add a comment, for example, initial check-in, right? And there we go. Hit enter. Oops. And to say what I'm going to do is say, all right, commit that, and now it commits. So now I can do is I can now work with that. So now I just basically built a project where I can store all my code now is associated with a repo, and I can check in and check out. People can collaborate with that. It's really awesome, right? Super high level demo on that, but I love the fact that I can script something built into Azure Data Studio. I can script something, format it, work with a source control right within Azure Data Studio. Love the fact that, and it was super fast, right? I didn't have to do anything. It did everything for me right within Azure Data Studio. And that was something that I really liked, is that I didn't have to go outside of anything. I didn't have to go to initialize the repository. I could do it right within Azure Data Studio, which was super, super sweet. Okay. All right. So the other thing I really want to highlight here. So I want to get to, let's check my notes real quick. All right, so I covered a few things that I love, right? That were good, like this, how fast it was, query windows. Oh, let me do this too. I wanted to show this. Let me go back here. I made a note of this and skipped right over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new query window here. I'm going to select, just do the same thing. Select star from human. Let's go back to AdventureWorks. Human resources employee. What I'll do is I'll F5 that. This is something I really, really, really like that SQL Server Management Studio does not have. Right? Again, try not to bash SQL Server Management Studio, but if you look over here in SQL Server Management Studio, I can highlight things and save it as a CSV. But here I can save it as CSV, as Excel, as JSON, as XML, and if I wanted to, I could even chart the data here that the query results returned. That to me is just phenomenal if I want to do a quick chart, right? And it's super easy too. I can and like SQL Server Management Studio, I can just do a Control A and a Control C, and copy and paste wherever. So the functionality just within the query window here is, I think, just phenomenal the way with things we can do with it. Okay. All right. So enough about, and there's so much more we could talk about if we had time, about the things that we liked, and what Randy and I are going to do again over the next 30 days is sort of do quick posts about, hey, we like this, we like this, we like this, we like this type of thing. So you can stay tuned for those. What I want to turn my attention now to is just a few things where we thought Azure Data Studio needs a little bit of improvement, right? So, and again, this is not to bash Azure Data Studio at all. This is going, hey, this was our experience, and we just want to share our experience in using the Azure Data Studio, right? Okay, so one of the things that we really thought it was lacking is if I go here, expand the tables, there's no table designer, right? I can't modify, I can't create a table, I can't modify a table. There's just no table designer. And that really caught us off guard simply by the fact that, you know, it was Azure Data Studio was sort of touted as more of a kind of a developer tool, right? So that kind of, I can create a new database if I want. So if I say new database, I can create a new database, but I can't create a new table. I can't edit a table. And that would be super helpful as a DBA. We do this stuff a lot, so that'd be super helpful. The other thing is, and there was no template. So what we would do as our task would be is we would, if there was something that we needed to do in Azure Data Studio, and if it wasn't built in, we'd go look for an extension. Well, there was no extension to work with tables. The other thing that I thought was, that we started using is we do, with our clients, we would deal with auditing, we deal with availability groups, we work with, SQL agent jobs all the time. So I love the fact that, so if I go and open this, let me close this here, and if I open my server, there's actually an extension that adds the SQL Server Agent to Azure Data Studio. So if you just say agent, right, there's a SQL Server Agent. And there's one that actually, there's another extension that the admin pack down here, if you see that actually includes the agent, the profiler, the DAC pack, and the import, right? So you can either install these four singly or just install this extension pack. The agent, I think, is almost there. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to show you this. So I'm going to bring over, I created a test job on my local box. So let me bring this over real quick. That's got a step and a schedule, right? A very simple job. So if I double click here on my server and go to SQL Server Agent, there's my job, right? And I can refresh, I can add a new job. If I go into my job, I can run my job. I can actually edit this job, which is awesome. So I go in and I edit my job. There's the information about this. It is enabled. I can disable it. Where's my step and where's my schedule, right? So I can actually add a new step from here. So if I was creating a new job from scratch, I would actually go in here because I can create a new step, right? Same thing with SQL Server Management Studio. I can create a new schedule. I think the schedule is a bit, so there's an available schedule. So I can say, okay, so I think it's a little light on how schedules work there. So it's almost there. Again, this is, like I said, this is things where they're not quite there, but still useful, okay? But I love the fact that, given my list, I can go run it from here. I can execute it from here. I can stop it, right? I can see what jobs run. If a job fails, I can see why it failed right in here. So that's cool, but it's not quite there. But I do use this. I go here first, and if I need to go to SQL Server Management Studio, I will go there, okay? All right, next. The other thing, this is I got really excited about this, right? So I went into, we do, again, like we deal with auditing all the time. And so I went in and said, oh, hey, look, there's an audit. There's the audit nodes, right? So I created an audit. I can't do anything with it. I can refresh it. That's it. I can't modify it. I can't create a new one. Same thing with server audit specifications. I can't do that, right? And so I initially got excited. And there was no extension to be able to do that, right? So again, back over to SQL Server Management Studio to do that. Availability groups, that is something we deal with almost every single one of our clients. And so this is not built in, but there is an extension to that, and it's called Always On Insights. So if I go to my server, this is one, and again, I don't want to knock, this was built by a third party. So if I click on that, I don't have any availability groups here, but it wasn't tested on SQL Server 2019, and it hasn't been worked on probably for over almost close to 2 years. So if there was an AG group here, it would just show pie charts. So it really doesn't give me, but I can get a little more information here to say, all right, well, show me, show me a little bit more details, but it doesn't give me the level of detail that I like in SQL Server Management Studio. And so here's an opportunity to, maybe take this, fork it, and work on it, right? So I do like, there's that challenge. And lastly, let me wrap up with this. There is actually also an extension for, let me go back here, for Profiler, right? And this is one where another one, it's an extension. It is, if I type Profiler, like you saw it in the admin pack, right? But I can also install it separately, Profiler, right? I can install it by itself or through the admin pack. And the way to get to that is simply just go Alt-Shift, I think it's Alt-P. Oh my goodness, where's my server? Oh, now I'm drawing a blank. It is, yeah, Alt-P to let, yep. So let me just go, Alt-P. Oh, there's Profiler, right? It's awesome because I get sort of the same level of event class text, but I only get there's an on-prem template and a standard on-prem template and a T-SQL template, and then I can name it and then click go. To some degree, I can't modify, I can't go and say, hey, what information do I want to collect? I still get, the event class and the text data, but again, I think this is a super light version of SQL Profiler. For a little bit, I can go in and say, if I go back to settings for a little bit, so if I go to settings and then go to data and Profiler, I can modify this a little bit. So I can say, well, what filters do I want to modify? But again, what I'm doing is I'm modifying a JSON file. I can actually add templates if I want to, so I can modify the, add additional templates. Things like that. So, but it is again, not knocking it. It's V1. I shouldn't say V1. It's still a little light on what I can collect. But again, there's an extension there for Profiler. So that's what I wanted to cover. Let me take a step back and just say, look, when SQL Server Management Studio first came out, it wasn't perfect, right? They built it, they added to it, and made it what it is today. Azure Data Studio is the same way. It's not 100% perfect. There's some great things about it, and we love it. So let me just wrap up with this, right? What are our results? And I'm just, and then we'll turn it. We'll turn this into the panel and open this up for discussions and questions, right? What are our results? Well, let me just say real quick, this isn't a paid advertising or endorsement for Azure Data Studio or SQL Server Management, either one. Again, this was just our experience over the last 30 days, right? SQL Server Management Studio wasn't perfect when it first came out, neither is Azure Data Studio. We love the fact that it was fast. We love the fact that there's notebooks included. We love the fact that it's extensible. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that isn't in there yet, and it can be frustrating when we had to switch between, back and forth between SSMS and Azure Data Studio. But look, we are promoting one over the other, but given a choice and feature parity, it's modern, it's fast, and it works, and we love it for what it does. We don't dislike it for what it doesn't do. We love it for what it does, and the things it does really well. It's fast. There's some great things in there, and and we will continue to use it. But again, there are some things where we'll have to go back and switch back and forth between Azure Data Studio and SQL Server Management Studio. But our day-to-day choice is going to be, first choice is going to be Azure Data Studio. Simple as that. And like I said, we prefer it. we prefer ADS over SQL Server Management Studio for what it does, and we don't not like it for what it doesn't do. Right. All right. So we got 10 minutes left. Let's open it up for questions and panel discussion. So, do we have any questions?
Let me unmute.
Okay.
So we did have a couple of questions that came through on the Q&A. So, and I answered those there. But the two questions were, what kind of notebook is it that they support? Is it like a Jupyter notebook or a Microsoft OneNote? It is a Jupyter notebook. It's not 100% Jupyter,
right,
but it's based on Jupyter notebooks. And so for things like, obviously, some of the stuff that we do where we're trying to describe query plans and things to customers, it's really great because it's just the mixture of Markdown and code is fantastic, right? Because we've always done that in the past with comments.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
If you have a query and you're just like, hey, this is what this, but be able to format that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of the things that you can't do that I would love is mix languages.
Yes.
So I think it would be really cool if you could have a notebook that had some PowerShell, some SQL, mixed, but once you set up a notebook for one, that's what it is. So that's something that would be cool to see. The other question that we had was, can you do things with query store and pending plans in Azure Data Studio? And I actually didn't know the answer to that. And this is one of the coolest things about Azure Data Studio is I just went and I said, hey, so the question came in at 11:33. I went and Googled and I found a widget with the top 5. You have the enable query store, got this widget. So there's a lot of stuff. One of the things that I think is pretty neat about Azure Data Studio is just the visualization options that you have. There's definitely a lot of functionality in Management Studio that we just don't have yet in Azure Data Studio. But the top query stuff. If anybody uses the reports, the SSRS reports that are built into Management Studio, they can be useful, but they're slow. Right? It takes some time. So, that's the answer to that question. It looks like there's a couple more that have come through. Does extended events do or just profiler? I believe what they call profiler is extended.
It is extended events.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go look up at the read the documentation, it is extended events. Yeah.
So, and of course the trite answer, does it do X? Well, yeah, everything does everything in T-SQL, right? So, really, we're talking about, is there an extension? Is there a wizard?
Yeah, and that's the first thing. If you have a question, go look for an extension, right? The first thing that we did as we were doing this is that, oh, it's not in there. Let's go look for an extension, right? So, yeah. What was the other question?
That was it.
Okay.
So here's a new one. Integration with Git is cool.
Yep.
I've battled out with SSMS 17 on Windows. Can you recommend a video of making that easier using ADS?
Yeah, we're happy to do a video.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do a video and put it on our website.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty easy.
In fact, this webinar will go out, but we'll do a video specifically for.
Well, and this, like we talked about, we did this 30-day thing, and I think, we wrote a couple of blog articles last month about this, this experiment we were doing, and I admitted in that article that, look, when SQL Server 2005 came out and all the tooling and instrumentation, DMVs and DMFs and Management Studio, it took me a long time to force myself to learn that, because I at that point I've been using the
enterprise
old way, sys processes, the old system tables and whatnot for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. So this was a way to just kind of force ourselves to really dive in. And I'll say from my side, at least, I choose Azure Data Studio first for pretty much everything. And then, like Scott said, it can get a little frustrating because you go to do something and you're like, I got to go to Management Studio for that, or just write T-SQL. But also, the extensibility. The extensions are written in, well, they're JavaScript, but you can use TypeScript,
Mm-hmm.
And they're pretty straightforward. There's some really good resources out there from Microsoft.
Yep.
And if there's interest, we could potentially do a webinar on extensions.
Yep.
At some point. So
yeah, because we're planning on updating some of the ones that we used and writing some new ones because to add that functionality that we need in Azure Data Studio. 100%. All right. Any more questions? Nope. Cool. Yeah. Hey, so everybody, thanks for listening. This was hopefully this was helpful. And let me wrap up because let me wrap up with this. There's as we talked about going from skilling up, right? And don't want to put Randy on the spot, but we were talking about this. This was how did he say it? Skill up or give up.
Skill up or give up.
Skill up or give up. And and that's what we see that all the time. This is an opportunity to skill up, especially if you're thinking about doing things with on-premise that span multiple platforms and multiple data environments. All right, this is an opportunity to skill up and and enhance your skill set. So I love that, skill up or give up. So here's an opportunity to skill up, which is really nice. So
yeah, this is it's like so many other things. If this is not the industry you want to be in, if you want things to stay the same, right?
Yeah.
It's whether it's PowerShell, right? When PowerShell first became big, kind of in the SQL world,
Yeah.
There was a lot of resistance to that, right? Because we've been doing things the same way forever.
For a long time, yeah.
But last month, we did a webinar on DBA tools,
Yep.
PowerShell module. Like
Yeah.
there's just some great stuff out there.
Yeah.
So, and I also recognize the fact that you're at this webinar means we're so-called preaching to the choir a little bit, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's right.
But,
right.
Anyway, let us know what your thoughts are. If there's, like I said, I think we both want to, blog a fair amount on our experience with Azure Data Studio going forward. Perhaps some short videos. But if there's particular things that you'd like to see, that would be
let us know.
Fantastic.
Yep. So, well, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time. It is almost 12 o'clock, or at least Pacific time. So we appreciate your attention. And if you have any questions or follow up, please. I didn't even put my contact information up in there. I should do that.
Next webinars.
Oh, yes. So let me do next webinar. So we do webinars every month. So let me bring that up. So we're still trying to TBD on what the topics are, at least for April. I think we've closed on what May's going to be, kind of a hybrid high availability disaster recovery scenarios. But save the dates. So Wednesday, April 14th and Wednesday, May 12th, we will be continuing this webinar series. So feel free to register, sign up for our newsletter so you'll know you'll be updated as to when these webinars and the topics and things like that. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But thanks for attending, everybody, and appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.